Tell me your story, for you're gone.
Welcome to the Fresh Toones Show. My name is Dave Puls, and today is one of my Telling Our Stories episodes, and that's a show where I try to encourage people to find some way to share their stories. Some of them may be humorous, or a lot of them are probably going to be pretty serious, but I think in that process of telling our stories, and we kind of figure things out a little bit better for ourselves. So even if other folks don't get them or don't appreciate them, it's the process that's the most important thing for that storyteller or songwriter to grow. And in the end, that's going to be the healthiest thing for all of us. Today, I'm going to share the audio from a TV show that I was interviewed on and featured on. And the show was called The Humanist Perspective. And they were particularly interested in two of my short videos that I had created. One was called True Believer, and the other was called Parallel Worlds. So on the show, I was able to share some of the things I had in mind when I created the two pieces. And also I was able to share a little bit about the process of how I created the animation. I'm going to play that for you right now, and hopefully it'll be interesting.
Welcome to the Humanist Perspective. I'm David Puls, the Executive Director of the Council for Secular Humanism. This series is produced by the Council for Secular Humanism, which is an international not-for-profit organization headquartered at the Center for Inquiry in Amherst, New York. Now, what is secular humanism? Well, secular humanists look to the natural and scientific for explanations and understanding of worldly phenomena, and we reject supernatural explanations. Secular humanists accept the methods of science and reason in all areas of human endeavor. Simply call the phone number on your screen or visit us online at secularhumanism.org. On today's show, I'll be talking with David Puls. Hello, David.
Glad to be here.
Well, thank you for coming. David Puls, you are affiliated with Animatus Studio in Rochester, New York, right?
Yes, I've been with Fred at the Animatus Studio for 12 years now, so I've been there a while.
Okay, and what is your role there?
Right now, I'm the creative director and direct folks on doing commercials and in-house productions for companies in town locally or nationwide if it's through the internet. And I'm an animator and an independent filmmaker, so that's my connection with Animatus.
And you come to us because, actually, I'll give a little bit of background here. One of the people on staff here, who's actually been a guest of this show before, Ben Radford, took a course with you. He was very much impressed by a clip that we're going to show today, an animation entitled True Believer. I want to talk a little bit about that clip, about that segment. First of all, how were you inspired to do this animation?
Well, actually, about 30 years ago, I read a book by Eric Hoffer called True Believer, and it had stuck in my head for a long time, and it affected my life. So 30 years later, once I got into animation, I realized putting it together with a song, with some music, that I could get some of those ideas out that I had initially read in his book. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, it's been played around the world at maybe a dozen or so festivals. It's been accepted pretty well, and although there are some scenes at some of the festivals that are funded by private groups or state community groups are leery about showing, and they have backed off from showing some of the showing it in the festivals, although they could see the merit.
Right. What do you think the merit of that clip is? We're going to watch it shortly. I'm sure our viewers will enjoy it. Tell me, first of all, how that book influenced you and what you think the message is behind True Believer.
As a young person and seeking for what I was going to, I guess you could say, latch on to as a life philosophy or religion. And I was feeling on a lot of different religions, a lot of different groups and political groups, finding out about them. Like certainly there was the SDS, the Young Socialist Democratic Party that was pretty radical after a while, and seeking them out and reading his book, I started to evaluate things very closely to say, don't just latch onto something that you're going to say that's the answer and you're going to hang on to it no matter what. I could see this in a lot of these dictators or that are in the film, that they had just latched onto the thing that they were going to, fight to the death to, and really didn't evaluate their own moral choices. Started to get broken down in the process, and just wanted to make everybody aware of that, to evaluate in the process of when we're seeking out something to promote or whatever, that we evaluate it and make sure we don't go astray. Certainly Osama bin Laden in 9/11 made it that much more aware of the situation, that
Right.
People that can lose their whole moralistic approach to life because they're so fixated on a certain...
On an individual or an idea,
Yeah.
or an ideology that becomes consuming,
Yeah.
without some sort of critical thought.
Yep.
Okay.
And certainly evaluating some of the dictators that I use in this, Hitler or whatever, it had moments when he just, a few different things in their life could have made them communist from Nazis. And actually he had marched in some communist demonstrations. So you can say, well, how could somebody be on such opposite sides that easily? And that's part of the thing. If you're looking so hard yourself, you can lose yourself in one of these philosophies or beliefs.
Okay. Well, that's something that we're very interested in. I would like to take a look now at your animation, True Believer, and then when we come back, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how you made it technically, and if we'll sit back and now take a look at the clip, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
Great.
I'm right. When I'm right, I'm right. When I'm left, I'm still right. And nothing you say can ever change that way. I'm a true believer. I'm a true believer. I'm a true believer that I'm right. And nothing you say can ever change that way. I'll be right when I'm here. I'll be right when I'm gone. I'll be right when I'm left. I'll be right when I'm wrong. I'm right. God darn it, I'm right. And nothing you say can ever change that way. True believer, I'm a true believer. I'm a true believer that I'm right. And nothing you say can ever change that way. When I'm right, I'm right. When nothing you say can ever change that way. I'll be right when I'm here, I'll be right when I'm gone, I'll be right when I'm left, I'll be right when I'm wrong, I'm right. 'Cause I'm and nothing you say can ever change that way. Believer, I'm a true believer. I'm a true believer. I'm right. And nothing you say can ever change that way.
That was True Believer by Animata Studio, and I'm here with Dave Puls, who is the author of that work, and others at Animata Studio. I want to talk a little bit about how you put this together technically, because I'm intrigued by the look and feel of it. How did you start?
The music was written first, and I did the instrumentals and everything in the music. Sometimes that's the way you have to do it when you're an independent filmmaker.
So you're also the composer of this music,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
yeah. And then off of that, I can start to start thinking about what imagery I start to see. I have an overall concept of where I'm going to go, and I'll start doing little scribbles,
Like a storyboard.
yeah, storyboards, and I'll do it real quick. And actually, sometimes the quicker I do it, the freer the ideas flow. And these may change significantly. Because I'm an independent filmmaker, I can change things on a moment. I didn't have 10 people producing different parts of this, and I'm going to have to go and say, well, we're not going to use this or whatever.
Right.
I can change it immediately. Originally, I was going to do this on film, so I had cut out characters that were all assembled with grommets on the back that they all locked into.
Okay.
And I started doing tests on film stock and trying to do some of the effects where one character turns smoothly into the next character as they cross this line of
Right.
I could be either side. It became very difficult on film,
Okay.
at least for my expertise.
So this was going to be for stop action. You were going to do stop action.
Yep, stop motion filming of this, and did some tests, and they weren't coming out as well as I had hoped. So about that time, a program called After Effects came out, and I said, "Oh, that's the perfect thing."
You mean a software?
Yeah,
Program,
and took it all into the computer, took all these apart and scanned all the individual pieces, and in that program I could latch them together. So when I moved the hand, the whole arm moved. I didn't have to move each piece individually.
Okay.
So that made it tremendously more reasonable to do. And then my imagination grew from there of what I could do now in the computer. The other characters, Osama and Saddam and some of the other characters were created in the computer, put texture to them,
Right.
and took them into a 3D world, and so they had shadows they could turn all the way around. So
Right.
then I was pretty excited. I could go any place with this with these characters. And
I enjoyed that you preserved the myth of them being these two-dimensional characters, and so when you turned them around, we saw you could play with that a bit. Now when you do your animations, do you use this technique for all your animations, or do you still do some stop motion?
Oh, well, matter of fact, I'm just started a clay piece called Hate Preachers, and I'm doing that, trying to do that mostly in clay, a little bit take it in the computer and do some manipulation of keying out things. But I really latched onto this, and I've done these photo montage pieces called Sharks in the Water, and one called Parallel Worlds that we're going to check out later, where I'm taking photo imagery and just combining it together to create this kind of surrealistic world. I tend to think the viewer lets it go a little bit more when it's kind of mystical and not really, I'm there, but it's really a strange world. Which
You know where I've seen, and we're going to watch Parallel Worlds next, but before we do, I'm just thinking now of what it reminds me a little bit of. There's a documentary called The Kid Stays in the Picture. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's a documentary, a commercial documentary that uses techniques that actually remind me, or that your imagery reminds me of in Parallel Worlds. So you might want to take a look at that. It's becoming more and more popular. So you might have ushered in a style of filmmaking. Let's now take a look at a clip that you just mentioned, Parallel Worlds, which gives us a little bit of your biography that I think the viewers would be interested in, and we'll come back and we'll wrap up talking about that.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
My name is Dave Puls, and in 1973, at the age of 21, I went to work at the Rochester State Hospital. After 3 weeks of training, I was placed on one of the back wards as a mental hygiene therapist aide. For a few months, I worked on the semi-civilized day shift with nurses, a part-time social worker, and on one morning a week, a recreational therapist. We would also see a doctor briefly each week to prescribe medications for the patients. Because there were limited drugs available at the time, the state of New York provided its severely mentally ill patients with all the loose tobacco they could roll and smoke. We regularly handed out bags of red cheap tobacco, the worst smelling tobacco ever. In the winter months, the ward would become one thick cloud of smoke. Loose tobacco and cigarette butts were everywhere on the floor, in the chairs and covering the ping pong table, a favorite rolling spot. In those days, the patients had to clean their own wards. A lot of the therapy for patients revolved around sweeping and mopping the long hallways, expansive dorms, and worst of all, cleaning the bathrooms. On the day shift, some of us therapists would actually do some of the work with the patients. After a short time, I was rotated onto the evening shift. On evenings, manual labor by staff was against the employees' unwritten rules, and I was told in no uncertain terms not to do any of the work with the patients. Somehow, it was thought of as being beneath them, and that it weakened the staff control and the hierarchy of the patient-staff relations. I actually enjoyed being active and continued to sweep and mop with the patients. This did not go over well. I didn't like working on the evening shift. The atmosphere seemed even further back in the dark ages than the day shift. One evening, an employee who I knew vaguely from high school was arguing with a patient over the TV channel that was going to be on. There were a number of patients who were watching the channel that the other patient wanted, but they knew their place and said nothing. The problematic patient was ordered to go to bed, but refused. As I walked into the day room, the employee had the patient pinned to the floor with his fist raised back to strike. I called out the employee's first name and grabbed his arm as it was coming down. His fist didn't make contact, but the impact of one employee holding back another staff member reverberated through that whole hospital that night. The supervising aide, with 40 years of experience, told me, quote, "Don't ever interfere like that again. Someday you may need our help," and walked away. The next evening, I was told that I was being put back on days where the hospital could supervise me more closely. It appears that the evening supervisor, who had offered his harsh advice, refused to work with me and said that all I did all evening was play my guitar. He was correct, I played my guitar, but it was always with the patients, and it was always after we had swept and mopped the whole ward. He gave a scathing report about me, and he recommended that my probation period be extended. Needless to say, I was glad to be back on days. I spoke to the very caring head nurse of our ward about what had happened. She then reported this to the supervisor of the whole unit. She came back to me and said I was welcome to make a report about the incident, but she also wanted to let me know that this same employee had been reported for 5 other incidents. some of them much worse than what I had seen. In each instance, the reporting employee had left and the problem employee remained. It appears that the hospital actually saw the reporting employee as the one creating the dilemma. Besides, they were usually the newer employee and they wouldn't be able to hack it in such a high-stress job anyway. It took employees with a tougher temperament to survive. Some of my co-workers had been MPs in Vietnam and had only recently returned. They never really fired the reporting employee. It just became so uncomfortable for them to work there that they voluntarily handed in their resignations. I resigned after 2 years. It is now 30 years later, and my memories are shaken by the photographs from the Iraqi prisons. I am tearful that I was unable to affect a brutal situation as a young person, and I only hope that these photos will shake us all to find more adequate safeguards. It absolutely can change. It requires that our leaders be diligent in their supervision. Basic human decency should be one of our highest priorities, and it can no longer be the excuse of those responsible to say, "Gee, we never knew a thing about it." Well, they had better find out. It is their responsibility to have people under them that understand that they must report to their supervisors when these abuses occur. For our leaders to expect this to work, they will have to adamantly reinforce this concept down the whole chain of command, or they will be responsible for its failure. Hopefully, America and the world will use the abuses that we have witnessed in Iraq as the catalyst to hold our leaders more accountable. We've got the tougher stance to uphold, but that's exactly why it's so important not to let our fears overcome our decency. If we become like the terrorists, they've won.
You're listening to The Fresh Toones Show, and today is one of my Telling Our Story shows. And I've been playing for you an interview on the Humanist Perspective TV show, and I've been talking about a couple of my short films, one of them called True Believer, and the other's called Parallel Worlds. So let's get back to that interview, and I can share a little bit more with you.
All right, and that was Parallel Worlds by Animatus Studios, and that's a rather personal biographical piece, isn't it, David?
Yeah, very close to me.
Yeah, I know we watched it earlier, and tell me what, how that affects you, and what made you produce that piece.
Again, it's been a long time simmering these memories that I had when I worked at the psychiatric center, and when I saw the photographs from Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, it just struck me so hard. I had an emotional reaction to seeing this, what was happening there, and it related to things that I had seen as a young person,
Right.
and couldn't correct, and how hard it was to live with that for 30 years.
Right.
And it's interesting that I still know many people that work in the center, and said, "Aren't you concerned about telling that story?" And I said, "It's 30 years later, and it needs to be told." And
Right.
and
What were their concerns? Things have changed a bit, I imagine.
yes, things have changed greatly, but I don't know what their main concern was, that I had stopped an incident of abuse. So the film actually showed in the Detroit Documentary Film Festival and was very well received there, and it's submitted to a lot of other festivals. So I hope it gets out and that story is told, because the most important thing is that even though things have changed,
Right.
it hasn't been eliminated totally. And as we see, we know, I'm basically telling how you could end it tomorrow,
Right.
in the services or prisons or wherever.
Through accountability.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's what you said was missing in your incident, right?
Yeah.
And that appears to be an issue in present incidents in the military, right?
Yeah. So it could be resolved if the head person says, "I want this stopped, and I want anybody that sees it to report it." It would stop immediately, or be eliminated by vast amounts. So that's the main important.
Now you do this work and the other one have political implications, have social and political implications. Is that a major motivating influence in your art, or is this just a part of it?
No, it's developed more, I'd say, in the last 5 to 6 years. I always based my pieces on very personal experiences. Initially, they had stories about salmonella food poisoning and my experiences with that, and people probably found those more humorous. But I started to develop, I have all this significant, ability to share ideas. Why don't I put more into things that I really feel invested in and wanting to change and affect?
Right. Yeah, we can sit here at a table and discuss ideas, but oftentimes art is a powerful motivating force for people that discussion or a conversation doesn't necessarily always do the same.
Yes.
All right. I want to talk a little bit now about how people can take a look at your other art. You do have a website.
On that site, you'll see a lot of information about people that can take animation workshops that we provide through the studio. And I'll be working with a lot of the students. There's 3 teachers, and I can actually share immediately, with them under the equipment that I use to make these at the studio, and show them how they were made and how they can do essentially the same thing. They'll build up their skills, but that's as exciting to me as making films, is being able to share to other people, because too many ideas and people's lives experience are lost because there's no record of them made. And really, animation is one of the most impactful medias that I know of that allows a lot of people different creative ways to approach what they want to communicate.
It's also a medium in which the tools are proliferating so that people can do more of this sort of work at home and cheaply.
Yeah.
So we're seeing all over the web, for instance, all sorts of homegrown animations, and in fact on television animation is more popular than ever, I would say, with shows like South Park, etc., and Simpsons having such long and successful runs. It seems to be a medium that is here to stay.
Yeah. One of the things I like to reinforce, because being a baby boomer, that a lot of us share our life experiences before we move on, and that there's ways to do it. You don't have to be a great artist. There's certainly ways of photo montage and putting them in the computer and telling your story, so it's a record, and hopefully moves us all along a little faster in our evolution.
Right. Well, that's excellent, and I'm very impressed by your work, and I hope our viewers at home have enjoyed the clips as I have. Thank you very much for sharing them with us. You do have a DVD which people can find on the web at your site if they go to animatusstudio.com. We look forward to seeing more of your work in the future, and it's been a great pleasure to meet you, Mr. Puls.
Nice to be here.
And good luck with all your endeavors in the future.
And that's it for the Fresh Toones Show today. I hope you enjoyed the behind the scenes of the making of True Believer and Parallel Worlds. If you'd like to see either one of those videos, they're up on YouTube. I hope everybody has a creative week. So long now. Bye.